Doing things a certain way because we've always done them is a logical fallacy. It's the appeal to tradition. We do these things a certain way, even if they've been wrong, because it's the way we've always done them. You repeatedly make the same mistake and justify yourself that it can't be wrong if it's the standard. That's the subject of today's class review, the Ranger. The class that D&D has never gotten right since its inception. They mean well, but they keep making the same mistakes over and over again. It's time to call out those mistakes. And for those wondering, the reverse to appeal to tradition is appeal to novelty. Just because it's new doesn't make it better either. I know what you're thinking, and yes, I am the Mr. Welch guy from the list all those years ago. The same list is the only reason why people still go to LiveJournal. I know what you're thinking now, and yes, I would be more than happy to explain the premise of this video using an example from the same list. Looking specifically at number 250, the one about not making Superfluous Man a superhero. In Silver Age Sentinels, I made a character whose only power was to duplicate another character's abilities at 50% strength. You could throw a bus, I could throw a car. You flew at Mach 4, I flew at Mach 2. Your laser eyes did 100 points of damage, mine did 50 points of damage. It was a nice power, but the character was constantly overshadowed by the people who did all the powers at full strength. So he got vetoed. Then I made Mediocre Man, a guy with average stats, but had every skill in the game at average level as a replacement. Then we discovered he was broken because the ability to do anything, as long as it wasn't that hard, was a bit overpowered. No matter the threat, there was always another way to get around it quickly, and my guy knew how to deal with it safely and expediently. Thus brings us back to the Ranger. So what's the point of that tangent? That specialists suffer in a game where generalists thrive. D&D is one such game. It's nice to have a guy as a backup, but if they're always going to be the backup, they won't do as well as the people who do their jobs better. Superfluous Man was underpowered because everybody else had his abilities but only twice as much. Mediocre Man was overpowered because he filled in every hole the party lacked. The Ranger is a fighting type with severe restrictions on weapons and armor. He's a skill monkey with half the talents of a rogue. He's a primal caster that doesn't even come close to the utility of a druid. He's awesome against a particular foe or in a specific environment, but then has a bunch of dead abilities if he steps outside of his comfort zone or has to deal with 99.9% of the rest of the monster manual. So who's to blame for the Ranger's woes? Aragorn. Blame Aragorn. When the Ranger first appeared, it was evident that the class was a stand-in for everyone's favorite Native American-looking heroic future king of the North with a smooth British accent and a severe distrust of trousers. Aragorn fought with 2 weapons, so naturally a Ranger must fight with 2, even if one of those weapons was a torch. That was still a fantastic scene, so why not copy it? And since Aragorn had a bow, the Ranger must also be able to use one. This is a format that pretty much every edition copied, for better or worse. Mostly for worse. Before we go into the details of the class and its woes, we have to know exactly what we're talking about. The Ranger is a fighting type class with a focus on light armor, weapons, wilderness survival, and some magical spells, often only at a higher level, and then the spells are of a lower level. They're known for having demanding stats as a prerequisite in some of the earlier editions, usually needing a 13 or higher and at least 4 abilities. They're typically of good alignment until that was dropped much later in the game. So you got a class that's some fighting skills, minor magic, and a few thief skills thrown in for good measure. Are we talking about the Bard or the Ranger? Yes, it's a very loose comparison, but it's not unfair. The Ranger doesn't have the armor to tank, gets cut off in the damage category due to the cap on weapon proficiencies, among other things, only gets minor magic at a level where first level spells are already in abundance, and even their hit points start to lag behind at higher levels. Everyone just does his job better. Now that we've got that out of the way, what are the specific problems? Get comfortable, people. There are many of them, and fixing them won't be easy. First off, you got the weapon issue. Like cross-class skills and assigned weapon proficiencies, Rangers have been hamstrung in their fighting styles for some time. Dual wield or bow, pick your poison. And it's been that way since 2nd edition with no sign of stopping. Do you want to have a wilderness-type guy appear behind the orcs with his handy wood-chopping great axe? Tough. Rangers don't do two-handed or use shields or anything else that deviates from the norm, which has helped them or hurt them depending on the edition. 3.0 made two-handed weapon fighting so complicated that it required multiple feats to use properly, and then gave them all to the Ranger at first level, leading every fighter in the world that wanted to go battle axes akimbo to take a first level dip and get a lot of feats and skills that would normally have taken a lot of multiple levels to acquire. 5th edition's dual wielding rules are so watered down it's often not worth it because all the cool damage dealing stuff requires two-handed weapons or ranged attacks. And if you need to use a bonus action, there goes your second attack, defeating the purpose of sacrificing armor or increasing damage output. But Rangers are magic! A little bit of magic, sure, which means you need to pay attention to your wisdom modifier, along with your strength, dexterity, and constitution scores. This has led to countless dumb and unlikable Rangers in numerous campaigns. In 1st edition, Rangers got druidic and magic user spells starting at level 8, capping off shortly thereafter with a paltry 2 third-level druid spells and a pair of second-level wizard spells. The 2nd edition Rangers kept the same number of Druid spells but lost the Wizard spells. 3rd edition Rangers didn't start getting real spells until level 6, but they had a few cantrips beforehand. 4th edition did away with the Druidic spells for the base Ranger, but kept quite a few magic-adjacent abilities on their power list. 5th edition Rangers start getting spells at level 2, but have to reach level 17 just to get 5th level spells. In all but one case, that's a lot of effort for not many spells. Worse for 5th edition, Hunter's Mark became such a crutch that they made it a class feature in the new version. Adding crutch abilities to a class is a step backwards. Next we come to the most famous abilities for a Ranger, and one of the most situational. That's right, say it with me. Favored terrain. And favored enemy if you'd like, those go hand in hand. The Ranger picks a terrain type and gets a bunch of bonuses when they're in it. Then they choose a creature type and get a bunch of bonuses to fight said monster. And that makes them specialists in a game that rewards generalists. Also giving many Rangers sad faces the minute they had to go into the Dungeon of Undead Doom and realized the dungeon neither counted as a forest nor had goblins in it. Or when they leveled up a lot and couldn't remember the last time they even saw a goblin. Signar players, you know what I'm talking about, when you got into the shooty jack-heavy list for a game that gave all the benefits to melee combat and focused almost entirely on infantry. When the name of the game tells you where most of the adventures are taking place, it's hard to justify playing an outdoorsy type guy. Not unless your character background includes the fact that your father was a torturer for the king and you spent the better part of your childhood running around in the castle dungeon. Actually, that's not a bad character idea. Then we get to the vast amounts of skills a Ranger can get, or should get as the case may be. Again, they get one-upped by another class, this time being the Rogue. In early editions, you got a limited number of skills from the Thief ability list. In later editions, you had your choice of skills, but many of them were also available to a Rogue, who got double the number of skill points as well. And in the 5th edition, you get one less than a Rogue, and most of your skills overlap, except for animal handling, nature, and survival. And 2 of those 3 skills should be acquired with the right background. Remember, if a background gives you a skill you already had, you get a free pick from the entire list. Then Rogues get to use their natural stealth and sneak attack abilities to hit and run far better than any Ranger could hope of doing. The next problem is the concept of the Ranger, with them being constantly portrayed as the brooding loner type in a party game, and people complain constantly about the lone wolf type characters. And that's a significant issue with playing a Ranger. They can be hard to justify in a party game because most of their abilities are designed to keep them, and only them, alive. They live in the wilderness, away from civilization and often other people, because they're a loner, Dottie, a rebel. They don't have clans like the barbarians do. They don't serve as the village shaman like druids. They hunt down orcs with the occasional help of their animal companion for those cold, lonely nights. You have to give them a reason to be in the party, and most of the time it's just to provide fire support. Or try and smack the bad guy with your 2 weapons and not get smacked back because you don't have the same amount of hit points, and your armor class sucks compared to the paladin in his shiny plate mail, or the barbarian in his rock-hard chest hair. Rangers have a lot of abilities compared to other classes. Still, their abilities are either front-loaded, don't improve at the same rate as other classes, or just a pale comparison to the other adventurers. Their magic is a joke compared to the druid, who can cast everything the ranger can, only better. They can't hide as well as a rogue. Their skills didn't go up as fast in early editions. In later editions, they get duplicates of rogue abilities at ridiculously higher levels, like the ability to hide as a bonus action at level 14. The same special ability rogues get at level 2. They can't tank like fighters, they have fewer hit points and a worse armor class. And fighters get better at both 2-weapon fighting and ranged combat because of their built-in bonuses or the large number of feats that the Rangers don't get. The Ranger is second best at everything they can do compared to the rest of the party. Unlike the Bard, who tends to be a jack of all trades, the Ranger is the master of none. The game never addresses the Ranger as a career, detailing their daily life and roles, even in their own books. Usually this is where I direct you to the 2nd edition Complete Ranger's Handbook, because the 2nd edition did class guides like no one else before or since. But even that book is just a list of kits, abilities, and attempts to make the class less background. The 3rd edition does a better job with Masters of the Wild, but that's still just a few pages in a book shared by 2 other classes. Nobody explains how the Ranger is there to help the local lord or to serve as a guide, mercenary, or scout for other people. You need to give the Ranger a reason for being in that party. And while the typical reason is the party has to go through the favored terrain of the Ranger, why are they sticking around afterwards? I've been ragging on the Ranger for a while, and my list was much longer. But I have a general idea of how to fix it, so I'm going to skip the final complaints. So for people who are into cutting other people's checks to do their work for them, I accept cash, the missing books of my collection, bullion, and of course the Mystara license. Have your lawyer talk to my lawyer. I know how to fix the Ranger now. We are breaking away from 5 editions of tradition to come up with something original, practical, and hopefully fun to play. I know what you're saying, and yes, 5 editions. Bet we never had a Ranger class, though you could make a decent one with a superior skills system that wasn't too off-brand. I know what you're saying now. And yes, we're going to make the Ranger better by making him more like Mediocre Man, and less like Superfluous Man. The Ranger is still a fighting type character, we're not changing that. We will keep the lighter armor to stay with the concept, but the weapon choices are right out the window. Magic is also gone, but might return later, along with the Animal Companion as a subclass. The Ranger is going hard in on skills. More importantly, the focus is on keeping other people alive. The Druid might have the nature skill, but he's not sharing it. That's going to be the focus of the Ranger. He feeds the rest of the party, tells them what to eat, what to avoid, and gives them a general idea of how to survive in the chosen environment. He becomes the ultimate skill monkey support character, filling in all the holes the party has in terms of abilities in the wilderness. We're reversing the Ranger's normal position. Instead of being half as good as everybody else, now everybody else is going to be half as good as the Ranger. In certain environments. First, we need to fix the favored terrain and enemy. That's easy enough, plus it lets me tie into another older video to do it. The Ranger at level 1 now gets one favored terrain type to start, plus another for every point of their intelligence stat bonus. This goes the same for favored enemies, so a high intelligence Ranger would be very good at fighting lots of monsters, and is comfortable in almost every type of terrain. Every so many levels, say 3 or 4, the Ranger gets to add another terrain and enemy to the list. As they get better, the quality of their enemies gets more challenging. But that way, they aren't limited in scope compared to a wizard who can cast any spell, whether they're standing in a swamp or a dungeon. For favored enemies, let the Ranger have a field day with abilities that track and fight them. If the monster has a vulnerability, immunity, or resistance, the Ranger automatically knows it. If they have a special attack, the Ranger will know it. If the Ranger has taken a monster for a favored enemy, just give them the stat list, because they're going to be very familiar on how to fight these things. Instead of worrying about extra damage, add their proficiency bonus when fighting the monster to the armor class and their saving throws against anything the monster throws at them. For other additions, use a base bonus that goes up every few levels, up to like a +5 for saving throw bonuses and armor class. Or a -5 armor class bonus for those that are fluent in Grognardian. This makes sense. If you've been fighting dragons for years, you're going to be waiting for one to breathe fire, so you are already prepared to get out of the way of that breath. You know that orcs, due to their physiology, tend to attack in certain ways, so those aren't the places that you're going to be. This requires light armor because you have to move out of the way without restriction at a moment's notice. For favored terrain, keep it simple. You never treat it as rough terrain. When foraging, you find enough to feed yourself and a set number of people. There's no roll, you just do it. You can tell what monsters are native to the area by looking for the various signs like tracks, scat, scent markings, tourists with binoculars, and a guide to spotting the elusive Necrozon, things like that. You can tell what the weather is going to be, and given enough time, will not take any damage from environmental hazards common in the area. Now, this only applies to monsters and dangers that should be there. A red dragon in a forest is going to cause a lot of problems, as well as an earthquake from a spell in a geographically stable mudflat. A good Ranger should have at least half a dozen environmental areas in his resume as he levels up, because the more he knows, the better he gets. Great! The Ranger now has better abilities in a niche area. How is this better? Here's the catch. The Ranger's core feature becomes that of the tour guide. He gets the passive ability that everyone in the party, as long as they are in a favored terrain type of the Ranger, shares the Ranger's skills, saving throws, and survival abilities at a reduced level. Ranger Bob tells you to watch out for, gives you some advice on fighting monsters, and you get to have a taste of some of his awesome bonuses. The bonus is going to be half of whatever the Ranger would get. Round up as always, but the party will get something. If the Ranger gets a +3 armor class fighting goblins, the rest of the party gets a +1. For 5e, just use proficiency bonuses for this. This also applies to every Ranger skill on their starting list and their saving throws. You get those at half level as well. These count as being skilled in them if that matters for the rules. You have to be within, say, 100 yards of the Ranger to remember that you're supposed to eat the berries with the star-shaped leaf on the vine rather than the round-shaped leaf. But you still get a bonus. Now the Ranger is pure support all the way. For combat, let the Ranger do it any way he wants. If he's got a two-handed axe or a spear, those aren't weapons that outdoor types would be lacking anyways. A Ranger with a kite shield would know the trick of ramming the base into the earth to serve as cover as they use their bow. Their combat bonuses should be tied to attacking from surprise, above, or from behind. To simulate this, if you have an armor class bonus from cover, and your opponent doesn't have one, add your cover bonus to your to-hit roll. At higher levels, this can extend to your damage as well. If you have heavy cover, you can make a stealth check to get away from it at the end of the round. The Ranger must move from cover to cover to get the best bonuses. This applies to attacks from the rear or surprise attacks as well. The more the Ranger looks like he's attacking from everywhere at once, the better the Ranger. Now that we've got the core of the Ranger done, we can move into the specialists, where many books focus too heavily. You've got a stealth fighter type who can drag even the rawest greenhorns through the unending desert of eternal death, and somehow have them come out weighing more than they entered. And the game designers think that you want to play a three-armed tree. I'm not making that up. Greenwood Ranger, page 59 of the Complete Guide to Rangers. Before we ruin a now fantastic martial class by just adding pointless magic, Let's give people options on how they play their rangers. You do this by focusing on an aspect of the previous inferior version they've been giving us since the beginning. The Grizzly Adams Ranger is the guy with the animal companion. It's the classic ranger type, but one that has suffered because the animal is just there to die when the wizard casts a fireball, or only does stuff when the ranger spends his entire turn telling it what to do. These ranger variants are all going to be treated as kits, subclasses, or whatever you want to call them. You solve the hit point problem by having the animal get half your hit points as base. Doesn't matter if it's a hippo, numbat, or Rio Fuente beaded lizard. Either it's young for the big boys or hefty for the teensy-weensies. They share your saving throws, and the most significant change is they follow an order until you change it. The initial order takes a full round to dictate to the animal what you want it to do, because the initial orders are going to be a little bit more complicated. Then depending on the edition, it's a half or bonus action where applicable to change it. If I tell Sir Beefington, my Gwar animal companion, to attack the orc, he will not quit mudhole stomping that orc until I tell him. He's going to keep going until that orc is dead. And that's when things get personal. Once you give an order, the animal will keep going until it has done its job. This could be it's reached where you told it to go, you've killed the target, retrieved your keys, completed your taxes, so on. When it does that, it just stops and looks at you for more instructions. It will always try to defend itself or flee, however, if pressed. So if you need that orc alive, remember Sir Beefington is not going to stop unless you pull him off. You are getting an extra attack a turn at the cost of an action to set off the chain of events. It's a fair trade-off. If you want magic, give the ranger a magical subclass. These are the ones that have learned a few spells, from the druids or a hedge mage here or there. Effectively, their special ability is they get spells. These are the guys that get equal parts buffing magic and nature magic. They aren't going to be ritual casters. They're not getting spells that duplicate stuff they can already do themselves. They should have a set of spells that are unique to rangers if possible. The magic might be crude compared to druidic spells, but it serves the rangers well by keeping his enemies on their toes. It should focus on misdirection or getting more information out of the wilderness than possible. More than anything else, it should be subtle. Lose the verbal components for most of the spells, so it looks like they're rubbing some herb on a wound to remove a poison. Make the magical ranger special compared to the others, so you aren't taking away from the rangers that rely on their skills. The less magic in the game, the more magical the magic. If you want to do a combat ranger, you need to make them pure nightmare fuel for their prey. This is the ranger for people who want to go into an orc camp, dual-wielding axes and screaming like a madman. For this, give them lots of bonuses if they meet the requirement for the favored enemy in the favored terrain. You are hunting creatures you know very well in a location you have memorized. This is when you shower the ranger with tons of combat bonuses. It's only fitting you do. They're restricting themselves to a specific enemy at a particular location. Reward them for playing to type. They get advantages for initiative and damage and can break away and attack again almost at will. These skills shouldn't fall to the rest of the party. In fact, these skills should terrify the rest of the party when they see the ranger in full beast mode. Worse, this kind of ranger will be rather intelligent to get the most bonuses for prey and terrain, making him a horrific cross between John Wick and Hannibal Lecter. I've been working on this for a while. The ranger is one of the weakest classes and has been for decades. I needed to fix more than just front-loaded skills, pointless abilities, and crutch mechanics like previous videos. But that's how I think we should approach the ranger, rather than the current philosophy of just, hey, let's give them magic. Turn them into the mediocre man of D&D, the guy with a very particular set of skills that they acquire over a very long adventuring career. You'll thank me later.